It took all of 6 distinct scenes to account for the first 20% of the book. And that, to me, seems like a problem. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Just another struggling writer. The Beleaguered Author's one-stop shop for commiseration and, hopefully, inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. Well, today is the start of another writing vlog, and last week I finally got started on the outlining process for this project. Unfortunately, I hit a few stumbles that I wasn't quite prepared for, mostly with realizing that my Act 2 could be approached in 2 different ways. And so I had to spend some time kind of figuring out which direction I wanted to take the Act 2. Act 3 is the same no matter what. It's just the path that we take to get there can be done in different ways. And while I haven't come up with a firm answer just yet, I do have a direction in which I'm leaning. And then I started thinking about how thin Act 2 is. It's well established that the middle of the book is one of the most difficult parts. You need so much to fill it out compared to the beginning and the end. And as I was doing this skeleton outline of Act 2 for Path A and Path B, I realized that there needs to be some additional beats, some additional moments for it to really truly fill out and be a proper Act 2, which then made me to realize that I don't really know what my subplots are. And that is kind of what I spent today thinking about, is subplots. So I read some literature, mostly just blog posts and articles about what is a subplot, what is a side plot, and how many you may need. And fortunately, I think that I actually do have side plots in there. I just need to define them more distinctly in my head and tie them into the greater series plot, and also scale them back so that they make sense on a micro level as well. So fortunately, I'm not quite as far behind, but I do still need to, like I said, beef up the first part of Act 2 and integrate these side plots a little bit better so that they all flow cohesively. So what I did today was I kind of did make a flow chart. At the very top was the series overarching plot, the one sentence series plot. And then I broke it down into 3 different, almost like if you think of a rope, if the main series plot is the big rope, I broke it down to 3 smaller, threads, and those broke down into strings, and they'll all weave in. My idea is that they'll all weave in together. And so I broke, block A was a plot, the main plot. And then there were 3 smaller blocks, which were these threads, but they each have different moments that make up. Is this making any sense? That's kind of what I was thinking today. And I made some progress, not as much as I would hope. I'm still really struggling with defining what a side plot is, because as I was working on this rope theory, I realized I couldn't determine if one of the side plots was truly a side plot or if it was just a facet of the main plot. Is that what a side plot is? Just a facet of the main plot, or does it need to be completely separate? And then I thought, well, why don't I have 3 threads for the main rope of the plot, and then off to the side I'll have more internal side plots, more internal threads of Arceli, my main character, developing mostly relationships and friendships and connections with the magical world that she never had growing up, particularly like the person who's going to be like her partner at this magical agency, but as well as the person who trains her, and just developing connections with like her boss and things. That is something. Is that a side plot, or is that just an arc? Is an arc a plot, a side plot? I don't know. I've never really thought this deeply about this stuff before, and it's kind of giving me analysis paralysis, where I'm just so worried about being thought of as a bad writer because I didn't develop any of these things, that I feel like I have to focus on them right now so that I know what I'm doing when I get into the draft. So that's kind of where I'm at. It doesn't feel great, but I feel, I don't know what the right word is, but like, I feel not quite proud, but I'm glad that I'm thinking about it at least, because again, I've never thought about this stuff before, and I'm to the point where I'm questioning everything about my process because it has been so unsuccessful. My track record is not that great. So I'm wondering if I do think about these subplots and these side plots and things more in depth and detail, is that going to set me up for success? I don't know, because I've never been successful before except for that one draft. Tomorrow I'm going to kind of get back to that flow chart, because I also don't want to make the book too busy. I don't want to laden it down. And at the back of my mind all this time, I keep hearing, don't plan a complete series until you've sold the first book. Not even until, like, wait until you've got a contract in hand for 3 books before you start planning for a trilogy. And here I am with a 9-book series and an overarching plot and everything. I know all that. I do. I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to make this one book unsellable by making it a trilogy out of the gate. I am going to make it a complete contained story, but I also would be doing myself a disservice if I completely neglected the threads for future books as well. That's kind of what I'm going to be working on this week, is figure out a way to make these subplots distinct in my head, make them work on a macro level, but more importantly, make them work on a micro level. That's my plan. I'm just feeling a little bit gun shy about everything that I'm doing right now, because I'm just questioning everything about my skill as a writer, because I don't know this stuff. And shouldn't I? I mean, I'm not trained as a writer. I just, in terms of, like, I've never really taken classes on it before. I don't have a degree. I just, learned how to do it from writing fan fiction. And as I've established, that wasn't as much of a teacher as you might think. So anyway, that's enough for me for tonight. I will check in with you guys tomorrow and let you know how it goes. Hey y'all, checking in with a quick writing update. It is now Saturday morning, and though I did not update yesterday, I did have a really great writing day. As you guys know by now, I have been working towards building an outline, and that has required a little bit of deeper thinking than I am accustomed to. Usually I am very main plot forward, and everything I do in the first draft is driven towards just accomplishing the main plot from start to finish. However, I do know that I need to be a little bit more cognizant of what my side plots are, of what my themes are, and how to tie everything together to make one cohesive, well-crafted story. So yesterday, I was really obsessing over these subplots and side plots, trying to determine what mine were. I figured that they were probably already buried in what I had come up with in terms of the plot. I just needed to tease them out and give them a little bit more shape and focus. So what I ended up doing was I made a couple more flow charts of the series overall and the book overall to try and figure out what my side plots were, what kind of character arcs and everything that I needed to specifically develop. And what I came up with was, I think I am overanalyzing it a little bit too much. I'm overthinking it. And it's giving me this sort of analysis paralysis that is not helpful. So what I did was I just basically determined how I want to structure the books. And what I came up with was basically the A plot, which is the monster of the week. It is the current issue that the characters have to solve on the grand scheme of things, like a minor bad guy, but it leads into deeper things. And then you've got the B plot, which is the second layer, which is kind of like a season plot. Like if you think of like a show like Supernatural, where there's a season plot. The Leviathans were a season plot, or the Angels or whatever. So for me, that is a set of 3 books, because as I have mentioned before, I have 9 books planned, 3 trilogies, and they all get broader in scope as you go until the very end. So anyway, so the B plot is a combination of all the A plots wrapped up together, but there are threads and clues and moments dropped in each book. It just doesn't appear all at the end. And then at the very bottom layer is the C plot. That is the main through line of going to be all 9 books, and it is really wrapped up in the main character, Arceli, and her personal journey. And of course, that is not something that is directly spoken about. I mean, it's addressed, of course, in her character development, but it's not something that like you would call plot forward. It is all about her arc. And that is like the bedrock of the entire 9-book series. So I've got those 3 kind of layers. And then in those layers, there are kind of sub-threads that, wind, like I used the rope analogy the other day, that wind up to make that rope and all of that for each layer. So once I kind of had that realization, I got so excited that I almost immediately started drafting the outline. My first draft of the outline is I have a very specific way of doing it. It's color coded, and I got all my color coding pens out to start writing it. And I was like, I'm not quite there yet. I still don't have a complete skeleton. I still haven't put all 3 acts together as a skeleton first. So I pushed the brakes a little bit, and then I started drafting the skeleton. My day kind of got interrupted, so I didn't get to finish it, but I'm about halfway through that skeleton now. And what I realized as I was doing it is, while the B path for Act 2, which I had mentioned in last week's video, I feel makes a lot of sense for the character's emotions, the sequence of events doesn't make as much sense as the A path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and blend the emotions of the B path with the sequence of events of the A path. So I'm just trying to merge them together in a way where the sequence of events is the one that makes the most narrative sense, but you're still getting the emotions of the B path, which is I feel more true to the character. So I kind of got stalled up as I hit that midpoint because I wanted to make sure that the sequence of events is both accurate to the path that I laid out and accurate to the emotions. So I don't know that I'm going to get working on it today. I've got a nerd date plan. I'm going to go to the bookstore. So today might not be a great writing day, but yesterday was a really great one. Like I said, I was so excited to get working on the outline, but I think that if I'm focused over the next couple of days, I can finish that skeleton. I can kind of fill in some gaps that I had talked about in that middle section that feel a little bit weak, now that I kind of have this sense of what my subplots are and with the character arcs. I can kind of slip those in there more easily and kind of shore up that part before I actually start the detailed outline. So I feel like I'm in a really good position. It was a really, really productive day. It's going well. This is probably already the most productive week or 10 days of writing I had in the last couple of months by themselves. So I feel so strong about where I'm at, and I'm looking forward to keeping the momentum going. Just not today, probably. So I will check in with you maybe tomorrow or Monday with my next progress update. Hello, everyone. Just checking in with a quick writing update. I wasn't terribly productive today, but I did get back to my skeleton outline that I have been working on, and I finished up Act 2. My problem was as I did that, I started to feel a little bit down on myself and my idea and my ability to write, and I just the anxiety spiral that I don't have enough good ideas to fill out this plot. Act 2 does still feel incredibly thin, and I am worried that because I haven't come up with ways to fill it out just yet, that I'm just going to fail. This is a pretty normal cycle for me. I feel like I go through it every couple of weeks as I work on a project. It's not really alarming to me, but it does tend to dampen my enthusiasm and my momentum when it strikes. So I'm trying to ignore it. The other problem is I realize that the main beats of Act 3 are pretty set in stone, but the details need to be ironed out, and after I wrapped up Act 2 in the skeleton outline, I was just feeling so like down on myself that as I started to get into Act 3 and I realized I didn't have many details, just battle happens to be expected at the end of a book. That made me feel worse because I was very confident that I had it kind of firmly fixed in my mind. All that to say, I didn't get too much done. Like I said, this isn't really too out of the norm for me. I go through these cycles of feeling like I'm the most genius writer that ever lived and feeling like I am never going to have a manuscript see the light of day because I just can't write. I can't do it. I have plenty of ideas for plots, but not enough to actually make up a book. So I'm going to try and work my way through that this week. I mean, there's nothing for it. You have to work your way through it. You have to navigate self-doubt and anxiety, and in my case, depression, as it relates to my creative endeavors. You have to get through it if you want to be successful. I mean, not even successful, if you want to actually accomplish a goal, as I very much do. The other thing is like this week is like crazy busy for me, and I'm like, I was thinking about it last night as I was kind of thinking about the week ahead. And today was meet the teacher night for my kids. And then tomorrow is my daughter's birthday. And then Wednesday is the first day of school. And we've also got appointments and swimming and music and, you know, all the other stuff going on. And then on Saturday, we're actually celebrating my daughter's birthday. Just looking at all that, like that I have ahead of me, and I'm just exhausted thinking about it. And that has been kind of an energy suck. The anxiety and like the anticipation of all of these things. Again, not an excuse because, as I have said before, everyone goes through this. Anyone who aspires to be a writer who is also a parent and has a job and has all these responsibilities, everyone goes through this. So it's not unique to me, and I can't really lean on that as an excuse to not get any writing done. But that just kind of colors where my mental space is at right now. So that being said, tomorrow and Wednesday, I'm just going to try and finish the skeleton outline. And also in the spaces in between, try and desperately think of ways to make Act 2 feel more robust. And I don't really think that this issue is unique to me. I do feel like probably a lot of writers struggle with the middle. So I'm kind of trying to take comfort in that and remind myself I'm not necessarily a bad writer. Lots of writers struggle with the middle. Even in published books, the middle tends to feel quite murky and kind of like a soup that you're wading through. It's just another hurdle that I have to get over. Just thinking of ways to make, especially the first part of Act 2, feel exciting or like worth slogging through. Anyway, that's where I'm at. Not very exciting, but yet again, another reality of an aspiring writer. So tomorrow I hope to be in better spirits and have a great more accomplished. And I will see you then. Hey y'all, it is time for a writing update, and I have actually had a pretty good day of writing. I have been struggling the last couple of days with kind of understanding my story beats and the arcs and the subplots and the foreshadowing and the character development and how it all is supposed to fold together. I have not given myself a reason to think about a story on this level before. Usually I just go, this is the plot, here's the outline, I'm going to follow the outline, and then everything just sort of gets thrown in as I'm drafting. And the reason I am shaking that process up is because I don't think it has really been very effective. I have only ever completed one first draft in my writing career, and even then I knew that it was more like a zero draft and it needed to be shelved pending very, very serious revisions. And I still have not gone back to that story. It is still on my list, but I have not returned to it. So I am trying to adapt a more robust process that I hope will be reliable for drafting the many, many, many projects I have kind of lingering up here in my head. So in a way, yes, I have given myself cause to worry about what I know about writing and my ability to write a story, because this is the first time I'm having to think about all of this stuff. But I also think that I've adapted pretty well. Yes, there have been days like yesterday where I was really struggling mentally and it was something that I had to fight through. But then today I get an epiphany and everything just seems to work. So today the epiphany was the 6-act structure, which is just a different way to kind of structure the story in your head. It's just a different way of framing your story. And I found that actually worked way better for the ideas that I have and the framework that I have, way better than the 3-act structure. And so I was able to do my skeleton in the 6-act structure from start to finish. And it generated not only ideas for how to beef up that first part of what I had been previously calling the 2nd act pretty well, but also it firmed up the climax for me in my head. As I mentioned yesterday, I realized that I didn't have nearly as much detail in mind for the climax in Act 3. And I had just been sort of relying on the fact that there's a big confrontation, as there usually is at the end of a book, to kind of carry me through. Today, as I was filling out the 6-act structure, I realized what I needed to do for the climax. I will say that both that idea and the idea how to fill out that first part of Act 2, they had occurred to me before, but for some reason I felt unsure about using them. And I still don't know that I feel great about them, if that makes sense. Like, it makes sense to me that this is the way that the climax should be. And this is a great way to introduce other and what I thought of for the beginning of Act 2 is a great way to introduce subplots and arcs and everything, and that ties in together with some of the other things going on in the book. All of that makes sense, but for some reason I don't feel it was kind of like a couple weeks ago when I was working on something and I mentioned that I didn't have the aha moment. And so because there was no aha, eureka, it didn't feel like I had a stroke of genius. It kind of feels more like, duh, idiot. And so maybe that's why I'm feeling a little bit like about slotting these ideas in. But that aside, that weird mental process aside, I do recognize that these ideas that I plugged in today make the most sense. And moreover, it completes the narrative arc, the entire narrative arc for the book. And then after that, once I finished filling out that 6-act structure kind of skeleton, I was able to look at that and go, well, these are my subplots. Duh. I can just tell that from looking at the skeleton, which I was not able to do with my previous work. I was really struggling to identify the subplots, but now looking at it in this way, it's obvious what they are. So I listed those out, and then I was able to go in and kind of work out in my head, and then I wrote it down in my notes because Lord knows I'll forget if I never write it down. Some ideas about the antagonist and how they are related to my main character's backstory a little bit, and how I wanted to weave that in and play that off and everything. And then I ended my day with bullet pointing out which scenes should foreshadow or should tease which subplots. So, and that was really successful. I'm not quite finished with that part. So tomorrow my goal is going to be to finish doing that, bullet pointing, okay, we should note that these scenes are key for these subplots. And once that is done, I'm ready to start the first draft of the outline. I'm kind of excited. I feel so strong about where I'm at with this project. I feel really, really prepared to go into the outline. And the thing about my outline is it's kind of like a discovery document. My first draft of the outline is like a discovery document. It's going to be kind of like how my first drafts are, in which it's going to be very, very plot heavy and focused. And then I'm going to be able to go through and see where it needs, okay, well, this is too much for one scene. Let's break it into 2 scenes. Or, oh, I moved too quickly into the next major plot point. I need to space that out a little and introduce a subplot here. But it's scene by scene. So while this is a huge step, it's definitely not the end game for my outlining process. I'll talk a little bit more about this once I officially start the actual outline, the first draft of the outline. But I'm excited. I'm so excited. Like I said a minute ago, I don't know that I've ever felt this strongly starting a draft. And the outlines are only going to make that stronger. And if I can get this outlining process done in the next 4 to 6 weeks, which I hope it doesn't take longer than 6 weeks, then I'm going to be in a really great position to actually start the draft, which is so crazy. When you think about it, it's been already 3 months, May, June, July, 3 months that I've been doing this run up, and then say another month and a half just to start drafting. But I feel like if I do all of it this way, once I'm in the draft, it's just going to fly by. I can reliably do between 500 and 1,000 words a day. 1,200 a day was what I was doing when I was writing semi-professionally, and I was having to pump out 30,000 word novellas in a month. And that felt tough, but achievable. So if I scale it back a little bit to give myself some breathing room, because of course I'm still reading and I'm still doing content creation, I'm still, doing everything else, I think that'll be pretty achievable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We can talk about all of that when we get there. For now, I feel really, really strong. I'm going to cross some T's and dot some I's on these last little plotting things that I mentioned. And then I'm hoping tomorrow I will actually start the first draft of the outline. So excited. I can't wait to tell you all about it tomorrow. Hey everyone, just checking in for a quick writing update. Quick because I want to go to bed. But I did get all of my writing goals achieved today. I finished plotting out in my mind where each of the subplots are going to appear in the story, which scenes they are going to be relevant to, and then I got started on the first draft of the outline. The trouble is while I was very excited to get started, picking up my color-coded pens and starting my process, which I will show to you probably tomorrow or Friday, was very exciting. I got about 6 entries into the outline, which is supposed to be a scene-by-scene outline, when I realized something a little bit dire. I don't have that many scenes, at least not in the beginning of the book. It took all of 6 distinct scenes to account for the first 20% of the book. And that, to me, seems like a problem. Everything makes sense logically, like the progression of the inciting incident to making the decision to join, everything up until that 20% mark. But it's just not a lot of content. It's just not a lot. And while I could probably plump those up with elevated word counts, that doesn't feel like the right move either. I don't want to be overly bloated, just for the sake of making it long. So I'm now wondering, am I going about this all wrong? Do I need to break this down even further to make it a little bit fit more conventionally? Anyway, I'm just wondering if I'm still doing something wrong. It shouldn't be that thin. I know my first drafts are thin, but God, this just seems really thin. I'm aiming for a 90,000 word count. And typically, as I have said before, I tend to draft very thin at the base, or my first drafts tend to be very, very thin. So if I'm aiming for a 90,000 word end goal, I could see myself accidentally writing only like 60,000 at this pace, which is not good. That just, not only is that incredibly bare bones, but it also gives me a lot of work that I'm going to have to do to beef it up, which I'm going to have to do either way. I either do it now or I do it then. I guess the real question is does it behoove me to do it now, or would I just feel better about getting my vomit 0 draft down on page and then take a look at fluffing it up? I don't know, because I've only ever finished one draft, and that one was so egregiously thin that it needed a complete rework to make sense. And I shelved it and have not been back to it since. So maybe I should just take the effort to fix it now. That's where I'm at. I outlined 6 scenes, which I then realized probably not going to cut it for a first act. So reason tells me to just move on and continue with what I am doing. And then this is, after all, just a first draft of the outline, and then continue to fluff it up as I create subsequent drafts. But then I also got stuck as I was entering Act 2, much like I did with my skeleton, like trying to figure out exactly how to slot in the specific moments and not make it too soupy as we get into the middle of the book. And that's going to require a little bit of extra thought too, because in my skeleton, she needs to train and learn how to do her magic properly, because up until this point, she's just been kind of throwing it around willy-nilly. Train, get stronger, learn what her job is, get accustomed to this new world, the agency that she has been hired, she's working with them to do this job, kind of learn the ins and outs and where she fits in all of that. that'll make sense in a skeleton outline, but in a detailed outline, you have to actually figure out the sequence of events, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm going to sleep on it, I'm going to think on it, and get into it tomorrow, I hope, and I will let you know how it goes. Wish me luck, because this has always been a struggle for me. Anyway, I'll check in tomorrow. Hey y'all, yesterday I forgot what day it was and forgot that it was time to wrap up the vlog, but I had a really great writing today, Thursday, so I'm going to add Thursday to this vlog and we'll just deal with it. Like I said, I had a really great writing day, really great. I think yesterday when we last spoke, I was talking a little bit about how I was feeling a little bit concerned about the way that my first act was shaping up in the outline. Very, very perfunctory. Just 6 scenes that should, in theory, comprise the entire first act, the first 20%. And I think I had good reason to be worried. But as I went to bed last night, I decided I wasn't going to stress about it at the moment. I was just going to continue with this first draft of the outline and deal with it later, basically. So then, as I was getting into bed and going to bed, I decided what I should be brainstorming next is how to open up the second act, because it, in my notes and in my like beat sheets and everything, it's just basically like a training montage and like a getting to know the new magical world, or there's probably a lot to be had there, but in my mental outline, it was just a beat saying she learns how to use her magic and she gets to know this agency as she moves through it. So I was like, oh God, now it's time to actually parse what that means and break it down into its components. And so I knew I needed to brainstorm it. And then I went to bed. And I guess my muse, or whatever creative part of my brain you want to call it, was working overtime overnight, because I woke up and I had it already all figured out. I was even like, I couldn't stop thinking about it even as I was like brushing my teeth, and I was like, I have got to get to my notebook. I've got to write this down or I'm going to forget. But I didn't. And yeah, I outlined out the entire second act. And in this case, second act is referring to the 6-act structure. So the entire second act and into the third act up until about the midpoint, almost to the midpoint. And that went way better. Like by comparison, the second act is 11 scenes compared to the 6 of the first. But the way I was thinking about it is that, first of all, this is just a first draft of the outline. This isn't a tried and true thing. And second of all, some of the scenes in the first act, I imagine are going to be quite long, because we're not just establishing the character and what's going on in like the opening snapshot. Like we have to kind of establish, okay, how did she end up here, and her life before, and all of that. And so while yes, for example, the opening scene is probably going to take up an entire chapter because it is just so long, and it is my main character, she's being put in jail. She had just been arrested for a minor mischief crime and she has to spend the night in jail. And so it is her being booked into jail. And so yes, there is a tremendous amount of things going on. She is being processed and placed in a holding cell. But there's a lot of like, how did I end up here? Thought process and reflections going on. And not just that, but also revealing to the reader that she has magic and how that has played a role in the mischief that she, ended up in and all of that. And so, yes, it is one scene. Like I said, it'll probably be a whole chapter, or maybe it won't. I don't know. But it's not going to be so straightforward as a plot scene. It is very much an establishment scene where you're letting everyone in on the secret. So all of that to say, yes, it does seem very short, even to me, and I do feel like there is still some meat on the bones that we need to pack in a little bit more in that first act. But the second act is where I feel really, 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 really strong. I got some great ideas overnight, like I said, things that really helped me not only transition the plot well in a way that makes sense logically, because this is, like, in theory supposed to take place in the real world, and so it has to adhere to certain real world expectations. Like, she's not going to start at the secret government agency on day one, and like the thing that I came up with is more or less she has to onboard, so she has to take training classes and she has to sign agreements. It's very much like a job that she has to do, and also, while going through this, she's also learning about the world of magic that she never really knew existed. She knew that she had it, but she didn't realize there was like so much more out there. And so we're establishing all that, not just for the reader, but for her. And I feel really strongly about that. I feel like that wasn't a component that I had planned before, but like in retrospect, it would have been silly to not address it. So I feel really glad that I kind of filled in that gap, and I kind of, the plot up to where I'm at, almost to the midpoint, it all makes perfect sense to me. So it was a really, really great day of writing. I am going to show you eventually how I do one of my this first draft of the outline. But basically, I just write out like a title of the scene, like the very first scene that I mentioned where she's being booked into jail is called Cell Block Tango, or just a funny little shorthand to remind me of what is going on in the scene. And then on another line in a different color, I write the characters who are appearing in this scene. And then in a third color, in the third line, I write the location of the scene. And then on the fourth line, I write a brief description, just 2 or 3 lines at most, of what the scene is. I just do that for every scene. And again, I think I've shown that it's not foolproof. In fact, as I was sitting there working on it today, it occurred to me that there might be what's known as a sequel to a scene, where it's not really a scene. It's more like just a page maybe or 2 of describing the character moving through space and time without really, like, there's not a lot of action. It's just like, oh, Arceli continues her training for a couple of weeks. Is that, it's in itself a scene? That's what I was asking myself. So I think my outline itself is probably not as dense as it could be because of this. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing either. It just is what it is. But as long as I keep moving and stay aware of where these moments are, I think I can stay on top of it. And yeah, so that's where I'm at. Like I said, I just got to almost the midpoint. I look forward to getting into what will be the rest of the third act and into the fourth act of the 6-act structure. I do still have some concerns that it's a little short. I do. I'm aiming for 90,000 words, and I do feel like it's currently a little on the short side. But I also think that there's going to be some elements of this that I just can't plan for until I'm in the draft. The last time I tried drafting this, the first act ended up being 25,000 words. And if that holds true, then we are going to end up with 150,000 words. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's gonna be quite that long. And then there are elements of that first draft of that first act that I just went where the muse was taking me, and ended up with some bloat and some things that I didn't like and would have cut in revision. There is that. So anyway, all that to say, there are going to be things that inflate the word count as I get into it, and there's some of it's going to be useful to the plot and useful to the story, and some of it is going to be like a tangent that I don't need. So we'll just see how it goes. But that's a problem for future me to worry about. Right now, I'm just going to, like I said, continue with this outline. And once it is complete, I can take a look at it, kind of calculate, okay, if this is how many scenes there are, I can kind of start thinking about word count and where I'm at with that. So that's it. I have had such a great week of writing. Yes, there have been some peaks and valleys, especially with like my confidence level, but it has been so productive. So productive. And I simply cannot wait to get through the rest of this first draft of the outline and kind of take a step back and look at what I can do, and then get into like the really granular second draft of the outline. And then I can start drafting. I feel really optimistic and really good and really strong. So that is going to wrap up this reading vlog. Thank you so much for watching. I so appreciate it. It has been really, really fun sharing this journey with you guys. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. It would be so appreciated. I'm having a lot of fun making content, and seeing y'all tuning in and chiming in with your thoughts on this writing journey has just really warmed my heart and inspired me to keep going. So again, thank you so much for watching. In my next video, I will have a reading vlog for you, and it has been another really successful week of reading as well. So I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you then. Bye.